Okay, let's start our first project. To do this, we're going to click the button that says New Project, and the first thing it does is asks us, where do you want to save your new project? In this case, we're just going to call this number 1, and we're going to save this one with our project files. I already created a folder called Mini Race, which will be our project, and I actually already saved one version of this project. I'm just going to overwrite that with a brand new blank empty project. And you'll notice here that there's also an additional file that I've already added here. This is a SketchUp file of a Mini Cooper, and we're going to use that in this project here in a while. So we'll talk more about that later. So the first thing let's do is save this. So we've already named it. I'll just click the Save button, and it'll ask me, pardon me, if I want to replace it, and yes I do. So I'll click Replace. And now we've got ourselves a nice, clean, brand new project to look at it. Now let's notice something here right away. Over on the right hand side, this is the 3D view section of the layout here, and on the 3D view you'll notice that there's a figure of a man standing there. You'll find that he's included with every new project, and if you don't want him in there, you can just come up here and either delete him just by clicking the minus button after you select that track, or you can hide him just by clicking this button here with this little figure of a man. So that's how you can get rid of him. They were wise enough to include him because when you import models into SketchUp or from SketchUp into Sketcher's Studio, you may very well have already created these to scale in SketchUp, and so this little man down here, he's about 6 feet tall, and so it's a good visual reference just to kind of make sure that you got things sized the way you want. But for now, let's leave him in there, and I'm just going to, you'll notice as I roll here over this edge, I get this icon that indicates that I can click and drag this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to make us some extra room here. I'll do the same thing down here on the bottom, and then that'll give us plenty of room so we can see what's going on everywhere on the page. So the first thing that I want to do here is I want to bring in a terrain, and I thought that a fun project would be to bring in some kind of a racetrack terrain, and then we can put our Mini Cooper on it file, and we can animate it. And so that's what we'll be doing here over the next couple of lessons. So the first thing we want to do is we want to bring in that terrain, and maybe before we do that, let me show you something here. I want to show you some real basics. Up here are your tools, and we'll talk about these quite a bit in the course of this training, but just for now I want to just draw attention to some of the more important ones that you'll use a lot. And I'm also going to give you some keyboard shortcuts which will make working much quicker, and these are the same keyboard shortcuts, by the way, that are also used in SketchUp. So if you're used to SketchUp, you'll already probably know these. The first tool here, this one, which looks like a big arrow close to you and a small arrow farther away, is the camera manipulation tool, and it's basically not just for cameras, but it can be for other things. But what it does is it dollies in and out. Dollying, like think of a camera sitting on a dolly that has wheels, and if you want to get closer to your subject without using a zoom lens to do it, then you would actually roll the camera forward. You would dolly the camera in a forward direction, or you would dolly the camera back in order to pull away from a subject, and that does look different than actually changing your zoom or your focal length. The next one to the right is the Orbit tool. Now the Orbit tool is pretty cool. Well, actually, let's just demonstrate this dolly tool first. If I click here in the 3D viewer and hold my mouse button down and then just pull the mouse down a little bit, you'll see I'm pulling away. If I raise it up, I come in, and it moves pretty rapidly once it starts going. So the farther, if I go down just a little bit, it moves very slowly. If I go farther down, it moves farther. So you can use that for kind of quickly zooming in on things, and you'll notice that it also turns the camera left and right. Now, I don't recommend in most cases using the dolly tool to go left and right, because there are better tools for that, but you certainly could. And you can see it's very easy to get lost here. I've just kind of lost my way, and so I'm going to double click on the scene here, and I'm going to go to my orbit tool. That's this one up here. Oh, and the keyboard shortcut for the dolly tool is the comma key on your keyboard. So just press the comma key. You don't need to hold down Command or Option or Control. Just hit the comma key, and when you do, then you'll jump to that tool. Similarly, if you press the O key for orbit, it'll change to the orbit. So I'm going to press the O key now, and watch when I do. You'll see that we switch to the orbit tool. Okay, and with the orbit tool selected, I'm just going to click and move left and right. And what I'm doing is I know you can't tell that I'm moving anything, but I'm trying to find where we were. And there we are. Now I'm starting to get close to where we belong here. And I'll switch to the hand tool, that's right here, to move up and down, to move vertically and horizontally. This doesn't rotate the camera, it just shifts everything left or right if you drag left or right, or up and down if you move up and down, but the head of the camera doesn't rotate when you do this. So the keyboard shortcut for the hand tool is H for hand. So I'll press that, and then I'll just drag down a little bit here, and we'll start to see that we're starting to look like we're getting back into normal land. I'll press O again to get our orbit tool and just kind of move things into position here. H again and kind of position that. So now we're kind of looking at things the way that they were when we first started this project. And I'm looking here for our guy, but I don't see him. So I'm not sure if maybe I missed something here. Let's see where our fella is here. I'm going to use our dolly tool. I'm just going to back up a little bit here and see if I can spot our guy. Okay, I think he's in here. I think that I'm just so far away that I can't see him. And so I'm just going to come on down here. I'm going to orbit so that I can kind of get the hand tool. And we're going to find, now I'm going to hit the comma key, so I'm back in here, and I'm just going to zoom in. And the hand tool to raise it up a little bit. You see that little dot in the middle there? That's our guy. And that's what I mean by the by using the dolly tool. It's a great tool to use, but it can you can lose your way very rapidly. So just be aware of that. But let me just kind of zoom in on our guy here and raise him up a little bit more. There we are. Okay. And let's see, let's orbit around here a little bit. I seem to remember that he was actually on the right side last time that we looked at this there. I think that was where we started from. Okay. And it's just, I'll double click here on this plane, and when I do, what it does is it kind of levels up the horizon. So if you click on an object, let's say you were to click on the side of a building, it would try to align you with that building so that you would see the side. And we'll look at this more when we have some objects here. But it's sometimes a quick way to kind of straighten things out. Let's see, we'll move over here a little bit. There we go, now we're back in business. You can see here that there's this tan area, and that's not actually like it's not supposed to represent a solid piece of ground. It's just kind of a visual aid to let you know that we're looking at a horizontal ground plane, even though there's not actually a plane there, but that's where one would go. And then the white area above that would be the area above the horizon. And so you can actually bring in backgrounds and kind of create a setting for your scene, and we'll do that later on. I'm not going to do that right now. I want to talk a little bit about these blue lines, these lines that you see here. You have these three lines that are all at 90 90 degrees to each other. So you've got two that are representing our horizontal or our ground plane, and then you have the blue one which represents vertical. And you'll notice down here, and this section that we're looking at down here is the scene editor area. And when you're looking at the scene editor, you can see that there are some columns for red, green, and blue, and it's a place for putting in numbers. So you can actually see the positioning of things relative to this this center point here, where everything comes together, which is known as the scene origin. And so for our scene, for our project, this is the world origin. This is the master origin that everything is referenced to. So this guy is referenced to the origin, and he's a little bit offset, as you can see, though it doesn't tell you that. It says that he's at zero, at the zero position, 0, 0, 0, and yet he's not right there in the middle. Well, I'm going to show you why that is. This is an important lesson to learn before we go anywhere else. So what I'm going to do is, with him selected, and maybe before I actually do this, let me just demonstrate this for you. I'm going to press O for the orbit key. I'm going to rotate this a little bit so we can look down just a bit here. I'll double click so we kind of level things up a bit. Use the hand to pull him down. Okay, now what I want you to notice is one of the buttons that we have up here looks like you could rotate around the blue line, and that's what it's showing you here. And every time I click this button, he's going to move 90 degrees in a circle around his origin. So if the model of our man here was actually created in SketchUp so that he had been positioned in the SketchUp scene right at the center of its world, then his origin settings would be 0, 0, 0 for him. But in this world that we're looking at, our Sketchers Studio world, he's sitting off to the right of that a little bit. Now watch what happens when I press this button up here, this rotation tool. He's moving, he moved 90 degrees around the center of where he was actually positioned in SketchUp. So as you can see, he's actually his origin was actually set offset from him a little bit. Let's look at that in SketchUp, and we'll see how that works and how we can fix it. So with him selected, and he's selected up here in the track area, you can click on this icon for SketchUp here, and it'll open up the model if the model actually exists on your computer, which is not always the case, but we'll get into that later. And by clicking on this, it'll launch SketchUp, and it'll open him up. Now it's telling me in SketchUp here that he was created in version 6.4.245 of SketchUp, and I happen to have SketchUp 7. So it's just telling us that it's going to upgrade this file so that it matches the new one. And if I wanted to then open them up later on in an older version, it wouldn't be compatible with that. So if you're worried about that, you might want to make a copy of the original and save that someplace. But in this case, we won't do it. I'm just going to click OK. And here's our guy in SketchUp. And I'm just using my mouse wheel to back up a little bit. Okay, so here he is now. He was positioned offset from the world center, which would be this point right down here. He was offset from that here in SketchUp, and because of that, he shows up offset from the world center in Sketchers Studio. And that's why when I'm back in Sketchers Studio, if I click this button, he rotates around that common center. If I want him to be right in the center of the world, so that when I rotate him, he actually spins around on his heel, then the way to do that would be to grab him. I'll go ahead and grab the Move tool, which is the letter M in SketchUp. And just to really get him spot on here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my view from the camera. This perspective view, though it's very useful in a 3D world, sometimes gets in the way of being able to see exactly where things are. So I'm going to switch now to this parallel projection, and then I'm going to switch my camera to the front view, and I did that by going Command and hitting the 3 key. So now I'm looking at him spot on from the front, and then I'm going to grab him right in the middle, and then I'm going to click. I'm going to move him over to the right. I'm going to hold down my Shift key so that I constrain just to the red axis, and then I will click again, and that positions him and centers him right over that. Now I doubt if we're right on it yet, because I'm going to go Command, let's see, we'll go Command 5 here, and then that way I could see him from the side. You can see here up in the corner it says left, so this is a left view of him. And this particular kind of model will follow you around as you rotate. So I'm just going to find his center again down here. I'm going to click, I'm going to move to the right, I'm going to hold the Shift key to constrain, and I'm going to lock it to the origin. So now we've got him right on the money. Oop, thought I did. Let me put him back here. There we go. Now we should be right on the money. So I'm going to go Command 7, and that Command 7 just gives me a kind of a 3/4 view here. I'll turn on our perspective so that you can see the perspective. I'll back it up a little bit, and I'll switch to my hand tool to kind of center him in the world, and then I'll switch to the orbit, again hitting the letter O on my keyboard, and as I rotate the world you'll see that he's right on the center, and like I told you, he's facing me, and that's the way he's supposed to. That's the way this two-dimensional figure can be used in a three-dimensional environment. It's just set so that he faces you no matter which way he's looking. So for now I'm just going to save that. So I'm going to go Command S and save him. And now that I've done that, I can quit out of SketchUp, and you don't see any change yet. You don't see any change over here yet. But we'll get to that in a moment here. And in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this button that says Origin Settings. And when I do that, it shows us our guy in this world. And I'm going to move him into position. I'm going to center him in this world. So with our guy now selected, I'm going to click this button up here, this adjustment buttons. This one will move your character right into the center of the origin, just like that. And now that I've done that, I'll click Apply, and now he's in the center of the world. And now when I click up here on this, you'll see that he rotates right around that center. I'll go ahead and move him by clicking M for the Move tool, and though it gives you a slightly different appearance, it's still basically the same thing. I'm going to click him and I'm going to drag him to the right a little bit. Now even though I dragged him to the right, if I come up here now and I click this, you'll see he still rotates around his own center. So he's really got it knows that his center is right in the center of him rather than oriented to the center of the world, because we moved him to the center of the world in the original SketchUp file, and then we could position him anywhere in this world and he'll just rotate around himself, because this is still kind of an alias back to that SketchUp file. And so I hope that's as clear as mud. Now while we're talking about the Move tool here, you'll notice that the Move tool changes color, and I found that personally to be a little bit distracting, because for example, when I look at a blue color here, I would think that if I'm going to move him, he's going to move along the blue axis, but in fact he doesn't. He moves a parallel in a coplanar manner to the double rectangle that appears there. So that blue double rectangle around him is telling us that if I click and move him around, he's not going to change elevation at all. He's just going to move somewhere along this the red and green coplanars that we have here, and he will not change his elevation. If I click on him so that I get the green, then I could move him left and right but you can see that it's showing me, it's trying to show me that I actually was moving him. Let me change my orbit here a little bit. Let's get a little bit closer in. And then I'll get the move tool here and I'll move him left and right. Now he's actually moving along the red axis there, you see? And you see that little yellow line as I go up and down? Well, that's telling me that I'm changing his elevation. So as long as that yellow line is overlapping the red line, I'll know that he hasn't changed elevation. In this current version of Sketcher Studio, and this is version 1, holding down the Shift key does not constrain him or his movement to one plane. So you have to kind of watch it when you're moving him around, because you could change the elevation if you're not careful. Now let's say that we get his elevation off. I'm going to deliberately put him up high like this. If I look down here, you'll see that on the blue axis he's at 0.8, and this, by the way, is in meters, so he's 0.8 of a meter above the ground plane. So I could just click once in here to select and wait a second, and then click again and just wait a moment, and then I can change this and I can set it to 0, and that'll put him down so that he's coplanar now with the red and green axis. So that's how we move things with the move tool. It takes a little getting used to. I find that those colors of the rectangles, double rectangles, are a bit confusing, but the developers are aware of that, and maybe they'll change that by the time this movie comes out. If not, if it's not a confusing issue at the point that you watch this movie, then you'll know that they took care of it. Okay, so we've got our guy and we've moved him around a little bit. There are a couple of other tools up here that I think I'll show you about. We talked about this one, which just simply turns him around in 90-degree increments. But if I actually would like to rotate him in something other than 90-degree increments, that is doable. And to do that, I would use the rotate tool here. This tool will allow me to move him using a protractor or a compass. Let me show you how that works. I'm going to switch to the hand tool for a moment so I can kind of get a little bit of a downward view on him. Maybe use the orbit tool and even rotate him a bit more so I can see. I'll double click on the ground here to kind of get a coplanar view with the horizon and move him into position here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up and I'm going to select the rotate tool, and I can get to that also by pressing the letter R. And then I'm going to set it on top of him here. So you'll see that it kind of changes, and what I'm looking for is a way to get this to change. Let's maybe orbit a little bit higher here. And then press R for rotate. There we go. So now I can just set it on top of him where I want his center of rotation to occur. Click once. And then come out here to create a handle for rotating him. So I'm just going to come out here and click there. Oh, sorry. Let's try this again. Click once. Come out here. Click and hold. I'm still holding the mouse button down, and now I can rotate him. And what I'm doing now is I'm rotating him around. That's interesting because he's offset here. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. I wouldn't have expected that. Let's try and put this down here on the bottom of him and try it again. Click once, come out here and click again. There we go. So I think it was better that I put it at his origin. And that is to say, the origin of this particular object, this two-dimensional character that we have here. But this way I can move him however much I want. I can rotate him at any angle that I would like, and then when I release the mouse, that puts him in position. Okay, so that's a few basics. So we'll come back to this in our next movie, and we will use 3D Warehouse to go find ourselves a racetrack that we can bring in here and use with this model. So more in the next movie.